Hi, today I want to teach you how to do machine embroidery applique on a single needle machine. Does the thought of doing applique totally frighten you? Well, the first time I tried it, I was scared out of my wits' end and I didn't know what to do. This was long before YouTube was around and the internet, so we didn't have the availability of information like we do now. But I wanted to show you how simple and easy it is and how you can overcome your fear of doing applique work on your embroidery machine. It is a lot of fun, and the ability to change up what a design looks like by simply using a different fabric is fascinating, and you're going to have so much fun with this. So join me as I walk you through step by step how to do applique on your embroidery machine. First, let's talk about the supplies you need. So the first thing you're going to need is your hoop, depending on what size for your machine, stabilizer, your thread to match what you're sewing on, the fabric you want for your applique, heat and bond light, a marking pen to mark the shirt or the item that you're sewing on so you can get it centered. This one is water soluble, so it comes out with water. A good pair of applique scissors. These are double curved and I love these because they allow me to get in up over the hoop. The item you're going to sew on. Some temporary spray adhesive. It needs to be temporary. It's like a basting spray. I like to do a printout of the item I'm actually going to sew. And then you can also print out the production sheet. All of my designs come with a sheet so that you can see the breakdown of colors, which you don't need to follow these colors, but it shows you how many different colors you need, a picture of the design, and then it takes you step by step through, sorry for the glare, step by step through placement stitch, tack down, placement stitch, tack down, and the rest of it. And then an iron, and also some water soluble stabilizer. So let's get the item prepped. So the first thing we want to do is mark the shirt. So we are going to do the 6 by 10 design today, which is 5.8 inches wide and 3.5 inches high. So I'm going to take the shirt and we're going to fold it in half lengthwise, meeting up the shoulders. And then we're going to simply flatten it out. Now I usually like to have my design start about a good inch down from the collar. So because the design is 3.5 inches, I will start my marking here. Okay, and being 3.5 inches would be right here. Now we want half of the 3.5 inches. So that would be 1.5 is half of 3, so 1 3/4. So I'm going to do a little mark there. I'm also going to mark here and here. So I know that this is the line. This is going to be the center of the hoop, as close to center as possible, and then these will help me guide exactly where in the hoop it needs to go. So now that we've done that, I'm going to take the shirt and I'm going to turn it inside out. For stabilizer, I like to use, when I'm sewing on shirts, I like to use a fusible poly mesh and iron that right onto the back of the shirt, and it just gives the shirt a little bit extra stability so that the shirt is not going to stretch and shift. So I tend to do double stabilizer, because if you don't stabilize correctly, your design is not going to sew out correctly. So we see this is the marking on from the outside of the shirt. This is where the center of the design is going to be from here. So I cut a large piece of fusible poly mesh stabilizer. This stabilizer, I tend to cut it larger than the design, about a good 1 inch all the way around, just in case I don't get it hooped directly specifically in the hoop. So I'm going to iron this down. I don't know if you can see, but on this there's a shiny side, and the shiny side is the side that is the adhesive or the glue to adhere to the shirt. I like the polymesh because it's very flexible. It's, as you can see, it doesn't have a lot of rigidity, so it will move with the item, but because it has because it's the polymesh, it's not going to stretch. So I have this all ironed down, okay, and so that adds that extra support and for the shirt. So now I'm going to turn it right side out. All right, so now I have my hoop here. And I like to do some medium tearaway as well. And I like to just put it in here and kind of crease it down because it helps me when I get it inside the shirt. Okay, so we want to mark the center of the hoop. And I take my ruler and I draw a line. So this way I know where I'm going to be placing my marking from the shirt. I'm going to take my temporary spray adhesive and I'm going to do a quick squirt on the shirt. That way I don't have to sew a basting box. If you're comfortable sewing a basting box, by all means you can do that. And we're going to get some straight pins. And I'm going to take the whole hoop and I'm going to slide it on the inside of the shirt here. So now with my top marking, I can see here this marking on the hoop. Okay, so I don't know if you can see the line of the shirt inside of here, right there. One of the things you can do to get this directly where you need to be is to stick a pin in here, and then you can lift up to see where your markings are, and then put it right down on there. But one of the things we need to do now is we need to remove this top hoop because we are not going to float this, we are going to actually hoop the actual t-shirt. So I'm just going to lift up gently on the shirt. I'm going to hold this stabilizer with the bottom hoop here and the shirt, and I'm just going to simply lift this out. Okay? So now let's use the pin. Take the pin here in the center of the marking where we had, and going to go right here into the center of the point that we marked. And we're going to go straight down. Okay, and because we have the temporary spray adhesive, we can kind of move the shirt around as we need to, putting it in the exact spot. So we have this marking here, and we can see it's matching up here with this line. So we know we have it pretty well straightened out. And now we're going to slip the top hoop without moving the shirt at all. We're just going to press this down. And look at that. Pretty simple, huh? So now we're going to tighten the bottom hoop here to make sure we've got it nice and snug. There we go. We heard the little snap, so it snapped in. So now I like to press my fingers together like this to get the top, to make sure that the top and the bottom hoop are seated. Now we have that straight in here. So now we can see with our template here, the center of the design. I printed this off from the computer using my software. And when we put it directly on here, we can see that the design is going to fit within the hoop and exactly where it's going to fit on the shirt. If you want, you can cut the design out too, and you can see exactly where it's going to be placed on the shirt. So now we'll turn the design, shirt inside out, being really careful not to unhoop it. And now we're going to clip it out of the way. I tend to like to roll it up like this to really get it to make sure I have all of it out of the way as best I can. And we can fiddle with this once we have it on the machine too. Okay, so now we're ready to go to the machine. Okay, so now that we have the item hooped, we're going to load the hoop onto the machine, and then we are going to load the design onto the machine. So I've already loaded the design, but now we're going to load and start sewing. So you want to be really careful that you slide it underneath the presser foot, and you're going to want to make sure that you have all of this out of the way as best you can, so that we're not going to stitch any of this. Oops. Take some playing. So the way I have my designs done, the first part will say gray thread, or yes, this. So it'll be gray thread, black thread, gray thread, black thread. You don't have to do that. All you have to do, that's just to tell the machine to stop in between. So normally when I sew something, I sew all of these placement, tack down in white thread, and that way you don't have to worry about changing the thread for each one. You don't need to have this, if you're doing it in green and pink, you don't need to sew this in green and then this in pink, because it's not going to be seen once you get all this satin stitching on top. So for the video, I'm doing it in green so you can see it better. One other point I wanted to make is that you want to make sure when you're sewing on knit, that you use a ballpoint needle. I tend to use a 7511 ballpoint needle when sewing on knit. Okay, so now we need to measure what we need for the pieces of fabric. So I'll unhoop this for you and show you real quick. So I take it and I will measure, you know, the height that I need. So I need 3.5 inches by 3 inches for that piece. And then this piece is going to be about 1.5 to 2 inches by 2 inches. So I have cut those pieces of fabric, and we have the heat and bond light on them. These are just hot roller hair clips that I like to use because it helps to keep everything, you know, out of the way. And so I'm going to use the green, and I have 2 pieces cut already, and I have the heat and bond light on the back. And we're going to make sure we remove the paper before placing it on there. Now, if you want, you can do a little bit of spray adhesive on the back of this. I don't like to do that because of the interaction of the glue with this spray, but that's just me. I like to hold my fabric down. I know a lot of people don't like that, but you make sure you have all of the stitching covered. I don't know if you can really see that, but I have all of the stitching covered here. I'm going to put down both pieces, or you can stop it if you want to stop it between. Okay, so now I have both pieces placed down. The heat and bond light is on closest to the shirt, and I'm going to press start. Stop to trim. Okay, so now we're going to take the hoop off because we need to make sure we trim the fabric from around the stitching. And we need to do it right now because when we sew down the other piece of the pink fabric, we need to have the green fabric trimmed. So I'm going to trim as close to the stitching as I can. Without cutting the stitching. And I don't pull too hard on the fabric. I'm just lifting it up so I can trim. So I can trim it. I'm not pulling it because if you pull it, you may be pulling the shirt out of the hoop. And you just keep turning the hoop around as you need to get at the right angle that you need for trimming. Okay, so now we have it all trimmed. Okay, sorry, there we go. All right, now we're going to return the hoop back to the machine. to sew the pink. Now we didn't change the thread because we're not going to see it underneath the satin. So now we sewed the placement stitching right here for the snail body, and now we're going to take the fabric and place it. You can see the stitching here for the fabric for the body, and now we're going to place the pink fabric on top of that. Be very careful when you're unhooping and rehooping that you're not moving this part that is attached to the machine, so it's not throwing off your hoop orientation. Last time we'll remove the hoop from the machine. And we will cut around the pink. Again, not pulling too hard on the fabric. So as not to pull the shirt from the hoop. One of the things I like to do before I do all the decorative stitching is get a lint roller and clean off any little pieces of lint or fuzz as best I can, because the next thing I like to do is I actually like to iron the heat and bond light down now. And that way it gets the item adhered really well and glued down. So I do it now before I sew all the decorative stitching. And I just use the tip and I do it very quickly, just to get a little bit of heat activated. Well, one more thing I like to do before doing the satin stitching is I actually take a piece of water-soluble stabilizer, the thin stuff, not the really, really thick stuff, and I like to put it on here and I pin it down well out of the way of where the design is going to be stitched. It just gives a much more crisp and clean and more refined stitching, because it allows the stitches to stay on top of the item and not sink in. And you've heard of using the water-soluble stabilizer, definitely for things like towels and items like that. But even with a t-shirt, I like to use it as well. And you can just, you know, clip it here. So now let's put the hoop back on and get to stitching the decorative parts. Now we will sew the decorative stitching. So we use the green as a placement stitch and tack down stitch for the snail body and the snail shell, so we don't have to change thread right now. Now we change the thread because we've sewn all the green, and it is time to sew the pink. And now, following along with the stitch order chart, the eye sews next. So we change the thread to black. And now pink for the mouth. And now white for the catch light in the eye. And now it's time to clean it up. Okay, so now that we've sewn everything, we can clean it up. So the first thing we'll do is unhoop it. And since I used a tearaway here, all I have to do is remove that. And for the polymesh, I simply pull it away. And then I take my scissors and it just glides right through to be able to remove the excess. And then to get the other pieces here of the polymesh out, I just use this little hook here to help me get in, and not the polymesh, I'm sorry, the tearaway. You don't have to remove the rest of the tearaway. I just like to, because then on an item like this, I would put a cloud cover or a backing so it's soft against the skin, and I would use that, I would adhere the cloud cover to it, iron it onto the back of this so that it's not scratchy against the skin. And by removing the tearaway, it actually helps to adhere that cloud cover better. And then the water-soluble stabilizer here pulls away really easily. And then I have this, it's called a seam fix. It's just a seam ripper, but it's got some rubber points on it, and it helps me to get the water-soluble stabilizer out without having to wet the item. And there you go. I hope this information was helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today and for taking your time to spend with me. I have a free gift for you. Please click on the link included in the post, or go to this website address in order to follow along with the written step-by-step directions on how to sew out this design. Also, we have a free design for you on that page. The link is www.creativeappliques.com/blog/applique-for-beginners. Thanks again.